I never imagined that a simple walk through the woods could alter the fabric of my reality. My name is Nathan, and for as long as I can remember, I have found solace in nature. Feeding birds, exploring winding forest trails, and immersing myself in the delicate rhythms of the wild brought a tranquility that the chaos of daily life could never replicate. But some encounters in the wilderness are anything but tranquil. 12 years ago, I had my first brush with the inexplicable. At the time, I thought I could bury the memory, pass it off as a trick of the mind. I was wrong. That experience was only the beginning. It started innocuously enough. I had recently moved into a modest flat on the edge of a quiet town called Claymore. To celebrate, my Uncle Malcolm and I decided to grab a few drinks at a local club just down the road. Malcolm, a man of few words and contemplative demeanor, wasn't much for parties, but he indulged me that evening. We spent the night sipping beer, reminiscing about simpler times. As the hours melted away and the patrons began to trickle out, we decided it was time to head home. The path we took wound up Beacon Road, a stretch of asphalt bordered by thick woods on either side. The streetlights were sparse, their amber glow barely illuminating the gravel shoulders. Malcolm walked ahead, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his coat. I lingered behind, savoring the cool night air. When nature called, I veered off the road into the bushes. That's when I heard it. A growl so deep and guttural that it seemed to resonate in my bones. This growl was unlike anything I had ever heard before. It was not the bark of a dog or the rumble of a distant animal. It was low, menacing, and full of an intelligence that chilled me to the core. My body froze as my mind raced to rationalize the sound. Perhaps a stray dog or some nocturnal creature? But the woods had gone unnervingly silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I strained to hear more, and soon the growl was accompanied by another sound: footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy steps that crunched through the underbrush. I couldn't see anything, yet the presence was unmistakable. It felt as though the darkness itself was alive, coiling and unfurling around me. My breath quickened and a cold sweat prickled my skin. "Nathan, are you coming or what?" Malcolm's voice shattered the stillness, jolting me back to reality. I stumbled back onto the road, my heart hammering in my chest. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" Malcolm replied, his tone calm but his eyes betraying unease. He had heard something too, even if he didn't want to admit it. We walked in tense silence, the oppressive atmosphere following us all the way to the edge of the park. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, stalked even. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made my pulse race. Then, just as we reached the safety of the streetlights, I turned back and saw them, two glowing eyes staring out from the darkness. They were high off the ground, much too high for any ordinary animal. The eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, a fiery yellow that seemed to burn into my soul. Those eyes. Even now, years later, I can see them vividly when I close my own. They hung in the darkness, unblinking, and yet pulsating with a sense of malevolence that was almost palpable. Malcolm stopped too, his body stiffening as he turned to look where my gaze was fixed. "What the hell is that?" he muttered under his breath, though his voice trembled in a way I had never heard before. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was dry, my tongue heavy, and my legs felt like they were rooted to the ground. The glowing eyes swayed slightly, as though whatever they belonged to was shifting its weight from one massive limb to another. Then, with agonizing slowness, the eyes began to rise. Higher and higher they climbed until they were well over 6 feet off the ground. The creature they belonged to must have been enormous. Malcolm tugged at my sleeve. "Come on, we need to go, now." His voice broke whatever spell had held me in place, and we turned to leave, our steps quick but not yet frantic. I knew better than to run. Predators love to chase. The thing in the woods made a sound, then a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just a noise, it was a threat, a warning, and yet something about it felt almost playful, as if it was enjoying the fear it inspired. By the time we reached my flat, my nerves were frayed to the point of snapping. Malcolm, who was normally stoic to a fault, sat on the couch with his head in his hands, muttering about shadows and growls. He wouldn't admit it outright, but I could tell he was shaken. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside made me jump. My mind replayed the encounter over and over, dissecting every detail, every sound, every moment of terror. Life moved on, as it always does, and I buried the memory deep, convincing myself it was some trick of the light, an overactive imagination spurred on by a few too many beers. But the unease never truly left me. It lingered in the back of my mind, a constant shadow. And then, years later, it happened again. I had been visiting a friend, Sophie, who lived on the outskirts of town, near a sprawling forest known as Blackthorn Woods. The area was picturesque with its tall oaks and winding trails, but it also had a reputation for being strange. Stories of odd lights, phantom sounds, and sightings of creatures that defied explanation were common among the locals. I had always dismissed them as small-town folklore, until that night. It was late when I decided to head home, and Sophie suggested I take a shortcut through the woods to save time. She handed me a leash for her neighbor's Yorkshire Terrier, a small and cheerful dog that had been abandoned and taken in by the community. I didn't think twice about it. The woods were familiar, and the thought of having a dog for company was reassuring. The first half of the walk was uneventful. The dog trotted ahead, its tail wagging as it sniffed at the ground. The air was cool and crisp, the kind of night that made you glad to be outdoors. But as I ventured deeper into the woods, something changed. The air grew heavy, oppressive. The usual sounds of the forest, rustling leaves, chirping crickets, distant bird calls faded into an eerie silence. It was as if the world itself had been muted. The dog stopped abruptly, its ears perked and its body tense. I tugged gently at the leash, but it wouldn't budge. Instead, it let out a low whine, its eyes fixed on something ahead. Following its gaze, I saw nothing but shadows and the faint outline of trees against the night sky. Yet the dog's behavior was unmistakable. It was afraid. And so was I. "Come on, buddy," I whispered, though my voice sounded hollow in the stillness. The dog whimpered again, but reluctantly moved forward. I noticed then that the ground beneath my feet had grown soft and uneven, the once well-trodden path giving way to patches of tall grass and brambles. I stepped carefully, but the damp earth was slick, and before I knew it, my foot slipped. I tumbled down a small embankment, landing hard on my side. The leash slipped from my hand, and the dog darted away, its small form quickly swallowed by the darkness. Pain shot through my ankle as I tried to stand. My leg felt weak, unsteady, and warm blood trickled down from a scrape on my knee. Grumbling under my breath, I reached into my pocket for my phone, only to find it wasn't there. I must have left it back at Sophie's. As I looked around, trying to get my bearings, I noticed something. A shape. At first it was just a shadow among shadows, indistinct and formless. But then it moved. The figure was tall, impossibly so, with a hunched posture that made it seem almost predatory. Its limbs were long and sinewy, its head large and angular like that of a baboon. The creature's movements were fluid yet unnatural, a grotesque blend of animalistic grace and human-like intent. As it stepped closer, the faint moonlight revealed more details. Its fur, thick and dark, its hands tipped with claws that glinted like knives, and then there were its eyes. Those same eyes I had seen all those years ago, glowing with that eerie yellow light. My breath caught in my throat as the realization hit me. It was the same creature. It had found me. The beast sniffed the air, its massive chest rising and falling with each breath. The sound of its exhalation was wet, almost guttural, and it sent a shiver down my spine. My mind raced, searching for a way out, a means of escape. But there was none. I was alone, injured, and at the mercy of this thing. The creature lowered its head, its eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, I thought it would lunge, but instead it paused. It tilted its head as if studying me, and then let out a low, rumbling growl. The sound was almost amused. It knew I was terrified, and it was enjoying every second of it. Summoning every ounce of strength I had left, I began to crawl up the embankment, my fingers clawing at the loose soil and tangled roots. The beast watched me, its head tilting curiously, as if deciding whether to give chase. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a deafening drumbeat of fear. When I finally reached the top, I scrambled to my feet and limped toward the faint outline of the trail. I didn't dare look back, but I could hear the creature moving behind me, its heavy footsteps crunching the underbrush. It was following me, toying with me, letting me think I had a chance. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it stopped. I turned briefly, my breath hitching, and saw it standing at the edge of the trail. It made no move to follow. Instead, it let out one final guttural growl, a sound that seemed to echo in my very bones. And then it was gone, melting back into the shadows as if it had never been there. I didn't stop running or limping, really, until I saw the faint glow of streetlights at the edge of the woods. The trail widened, leading me to a small clearing where I could finally catch my breath. My lungs burned, and my injured ankle throbbed, but I didn't care. I was out. I was safe, or at least I thought I was. The woods loomed behind me, silent and foreboding. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of a branch sent my pulse racing anew. I kept glancing back, half expecting to see those eyes again, glowing in the darkness. But the creature didn't reappear. It had let me go for reasons I couldn't begin to understand. When I finally made it back to Sophie's, I must have looked like I'd crawled out of a nightmare. My clothes were torn, my hands and knees scraped and bloodied, and I was pale as a ghost. Sophie's concerned expression quickly turned to alarm as she helped me inside. "What happened to you?" she asked, her voice shaking. I wanted to tell her, to explain everything, but the words wouldn't come. How could I describe something so impossible, so unreal? Instead, I muttered something about falling in the woods and left it at that. Sophie didn't press me, though I could see the worry in her eyes. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the creature, its hulking form, its glowing eyes, its razor-sharp claws. The memory played on an endless loop, each detail seared into my mind. Even when I managed to drift off, my dreams were plagued by visions of the beast, chasing me through the woods, its growls echoing in the darkness. In the days that followed, I became obsessed with finding answers. What was the creature I had seen? Where had it come from? And most importantly, why hadn't it killed me? I scoured the internet, poring over forums, blogs, and obscure websites dedicated to cryptids and urban legends. The term dogman kept coming up, and the more I read, the more convinced I became that this was what I had encountered. The descriptions matched perfectly its size, its posture, its glowing eyes. Even the growl, that deep guttural sound that seemed to vibrate in my very soul, was a hallmark of dogman sightings. But there was one detail that stood out above all others: the intelligence. Witnesses often described the creature as calculating, almost playful in its interactions. It wasn't just a mindless beast, it was something far more cunning. I also discovered that sightings weren't limited to remote forests or sprawling wilderness areas. People had reported encounters in urban parks, suburban neighborhoods, even near highways. The idea that these creatures could be living among us, hidden in plain sight, sent a chill down my spine. They weren't confined to the woods. They could be anywhere. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself growing increasingly paranoid. Every shadow, every sound, every flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye set my nerves on edge. I started avoiding the woods altogether, taking longer, more circuitous routes to get where I needed to go. Even walking down well-lit streets at night felt risky. The incident had shaken me to my core, and the more I thought about it, the more questions arose. Had the creature followed me? Was it still out there, watching, waiting? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being monitored, that the beast hadn't let me go entirely. It was as if it had marked me somehow, leaving an invisible scar that only I could feel. One night, as I sat alone in my flat, the paranoia reached a fever pitch. A faint scratching sound echoed from outside my window, sending a jolt of fear through me. My heart raced as I crept toward the curtain, my hand trembling as I reached to pull it aside. When I finally mustered the courage to look, there was nothing there, just the empty street, bathed in the pale glow of a street lamp. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was out there, hidden just beyond the edge of the light. Eventually, I knew I couldn't live in fear forever. Avoiding the woods wasn't sustainable. They were a part of my life, a part of who I was. So one crisp autumn morning, I decided to face my fears head-on. I would return to Blackthorn Woods, not as a victim, but as someone determined to reclaim their peace of mind. Armed with a sturdy walking stick and a sense of resolve, I set out on the same path I had taken that fateful night. The woods were eerily quiet, the only sounds being the crunch of leaves beneath my boots and the occasional chirp of a bird. My heart pounded in my chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. But I pressed on, determined to prove to myself that the creature was gone, that it had been nothing more than a freak encounter. As I neared the spot where I had fallen, the memories came flooding back, the slip, the pain, the terror. I paused, gripping the walking stick tightly as I scanned the area. There was no sign of the beast, no glowing eyes, no growls, just trees and shadows. And yet the unease lingered. It was as if the woods themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard it. The faintest rustle of leaves, the soft crunch of footsteps. My blood ran cold as I turned toward the sound, my eyes scanning the shadows. At first I saw nothing, but then slowly a shape began to emerge. It was the creature, the same hulking form, the same glowing eyes. But this time, it wasn't alone. Behind it, I could see smaller shapes, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. My heart sank as I realized what I was looking at. A pack. They stood there watching me, their expressions unreadable. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. And then, as if on some unspoken cue, they turned and disappeared into the trees, their movements silent and fluid. They were gone as quickly as they had appeared, leaving me standing there, shaken but unharmed. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on the encounter. The creatures had had every opportunity to attack, to kill, and yet they hadn't. Why? Was it a show of mercy, a warning, or something else entirely? I'll never know for sure. But one thing is certain. They're out there, watching, waiting. And while I may never fully understand their motives, I've come to accept that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. This was no longer just a story to me. It was a reality I had lived. And now, it's a reality I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.